Welcome everyone to Engineers Without Borders' first global seminar this semester. I'm really excited to be presenting and hosting an alumni panel. Um, I think that we're in for a really good night, and I'm really excited to be talking about the topics of sustainability as well as global development with our panelists. For our first question tonight, I want to ask, what did you all learn about global development during your experience with Engineers Without Borders?
Should we go in a certain order, or do you have a preference after?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have, I think you should go first, Jessica, and then Madison,
Well,
and then
okay.
Isabella.
Um, what did I learn about global development? I think something that was really interesting was the opportunity we had to go to the national conference. Um, my last year as at EWB, and we heard a lot of feedback about kind of how to manage your project and the importance of listening to the community members and kind of thinking about effects that your project might have that aren't engineering related. So kind of the political power and social networks in a community and how that can have a really big effect on how effective your project is.
Gotcha. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
And kind of,
Madison?
yeah, piggybacking off of that, I think my number one takeaway from doing Engineers Without Borders and having kind of a foot in the door for global development is uh, how important communications is and kind of the things that maybe aren't as technical that you learn in the classroom. You know, all that stuff is still important too. It's still important to make sure the water flows right, the solar panels generate power, but I think in all the projects that we've experienced, our biggest hurdles have been community relations and making sure the communication is strong and we're working on a partnership. That was my number one takeaway, and I hope that I'm carrying that with me into life after Engineers Without Borders. But yeah, that's the part I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with what Jessica and Madison said. I feel like when I was in Engineers Without Borders, I was doing like way more stuff beyond technical. I feel like project management and organization and forming and not just forming, but then also being able to maintain partnerships and communication is really important. And also learning how to take a critical approach to global development issues. I feel like a lot of times nonprofit work and like Engineers Without Borders type stuff sounds really cool, but it's not always actually sustainable or feasible. So I think Engineers Without Borders did a pretty good job overall since our projects are so long term. And we emphasize that community partnership, but not everything in the global development sphere does that the same way.
Gotcha. Those are all very insightful responses. With that being said, could you all give a brief introduction? Just like explain yourself and connection as Engineers Without Borders. Completely skipped over that at the start. My bad.
Should I go first again? Perfect. Hey everybody, my name is Jessica Kissel. I am a 2020 Georgia Tech grad in civil engineering. I did not go to virtual graduation, but I heard it was a thing. And after graduation, I moved to San Jose, California. I'm currently doing a master's program at San Jose State, and I have a class in a couple hours. And I should graduate from that in May. I am working also full-time as a junior engineer at San Jose Water Company. It's the water utility for the San Jose kind of metro area. And I work in capital planning, and I'm in charge of the hydraulic modeling.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Thanks, Madison.
Thanks, Jessica.
So I graduated from Georgia Tech in December 2020 with a degree in mechanical engineering and some focus in energy. And then after graduation, I moved out to Portland, Oregon to work for EDP Renewables. And I work in development of mainly solar and storage projects. We're actually out on site right now. Let me see if I can flip my camera. That's why I'm taking this call from a car. This is where solar panels will be.
That is so cool. Whoa.
Yeah.
I love how interactive the call is.
So that's what I've been working on. And definitely, Jessica, if you ever want to talk about water in California, that would be a great conversation because that's such a huge topic right now.
Yeah, very interesting topic. Absolutely.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabella. I also graduated in 2020 with an environmental engineering degree. And during my time at Tech, I was part of the Nicaragua project all 4.5 years. So I really saw it through a lot of different phases, some good, some like not so good. But I'm really proud of like how far the project has come, and is still going. And right now, after I graduate, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm still in the Southeast, and I'm working for like a private design consulting firm in the field of water and wastewater master planning, which is pretty broad. We do a lot of hydraulic modeling, like Jessica mentioned, but we do a lot of big picture stuff, like entire water. And we also work helping utilities meet like regulation requirements, such as the lead and copper rule and a lot of emergency kind of like preparedness and like resiliency acts. So that's been interesting to learn about the regulation and policy, a core part of civil infrastructure.
That sounds super cool.
I forgot to mention that I was on the Nicaragua project at Georgia Tech under Isabella's excellent leadership.
And yours too.
I also forgot to mention I worked on the project in Uganda for about 4 years. I was the tech lead, and then I switched over to work in project relations with the executive committee in my last year at Georgia Tech.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for giving these brief introductions. I really appreciate it. Going back to the questions, what do you see as the largest detracting factors impacting students who wish to pursue a career in sustainability? Kind of add to that for some reasoning about why we're asking is we're starting a new initiative called the Humanitarian Engineering Pipeline, which is to try to get students who are interested in sustainable careers towards those careers, because currently the pathway to get students to these careers is underdeveloped.
Jessica, do you want to go first again and just keep the order?
Sure, why not? That's a great question. I think that I was always focused on a career in the public sector, at least, if not sustainability specifically. But I know that there's a lot of good jobs and a lot of money in other sectors that might not be so focused on humanitarian ends. I think that having events like this just to kind of get a better idea of what people's actual day-to-day jobs look like might be helpful. Bella?
I think so too. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think giving students like an insight on what's going on is key. Isabella, do you want to build off of that?
Sure. So I guess in my mind, I think sustainability is pretty diverse and you can like incorporate it into a lot of different careers. I guess there are some more careers that some might deem more unethical or more about just making money. But I feel like if a lot of us have background in like engineering or like international affairs or policy or whatever other majors tech offers, there's definitely like a lot of options. And it doesn't always have to be something that like screams sustainability. While I was at Tech, I was really involved with Serve, Learn, Sustain. Hopefully, all of y'all know about that department. And I feel like being a part of that, there was a ton of sustainability like around me all the time. And I thought like, oh, like how can I actually contribute? Like, am I supposed to go get a job for like an NGO that's trying to contribute to the UN like sustainable development goals, or should I go work for like a department that has sustainability in its title? But I feel like at the end of the day, if you're doing more like technical work, like something I'm doing, you're still contributing to sustainability because we're working on providing communities with clean water and sanitation, or if you do something like energy. I just feel like pretty much any field can fit sustainability if you make it. It might not be like your company's number one priority, or it might not be like a nonprofit or something, but I think sustainability is like a big deal and companies care about it, and there's like money to be made too. So I think there's a lot of options.
I think that's a really good point, actually. I know that our corporate leadership really focuses on sustainability because that's what our investors want from us. So we have a lot of green initiatives that don't have to do with delivering water. Like all of our company cars will be electric in the future. We're moving towards that. We're moving towards having solar panels where we all park. So nothing specifically to do with our water operation, but kind of more broadly other sustainable goals our company has.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jessica and Isabella said. And then on top of it too, I would just say, like, leverage us. You know, you're always available to reach out to me. My company's always hiring, or from Georgia Tech, you know, met a lot of people who were interested in sustainability through Engineers Without Borders and classes and whatnot. So, you know, there's always people looking for new bright minds, and all of y'all have great experience with Engineers Without Borders. That would be really valuable to a lot of companies or public institutions.
Definitely agree. I think moving on to the next question now, which is to describe the impact that Engineers Without Borders has had in your view of sustainability. Did it help guide you towards your career? You want to start off again, Jessica?
Sure. I think I chose to join Engineers Without Borders because that's something I was really interested in. I had worked on international development projects before. And so I sought out Engineers Without Borders as soon as I got to tech. And I think that it's a really interesting space because there are so many projects that people do for a short period of time, so many like kind of things people will do for a week. And those projects might not necessarily help the community in a sustainable way. And Engineers Without Borders tries really hard to make sure that we're involved with the community, with the local NGO, and that we really kind of know how our project will affect the community. But still, there's tons of stories about projects that didn't go as planned. So I think it can be really challenging, and that was something that I found really interesting about working with Engineers Without Borders.
Yeah, I agree. I especially appreciate the fact that you're working on a long-term project and you're seeing so many issues come up that you have to be the ones kind of solving. And it's one of the first experiences we'll have as college students doing it. And it creates a really good baseline for dealing with it in all sorts of projects. And yeah, same as Jessica. I sought out Engineers Without Borders when I got to tech for that reason and for sustainability reasons. And I feel like I've learned a lot from Engineers Without Borders.
Yeah, I also knew I really wanted to get involved in an organization like Engineers Without Borders when I got to college, because I've always just been interested in like helping people and learning new things, and kind of like a global development type project really interested me. But as I kind of went along in college and learned more, view of like sustainability expanded, I thought actually more about sustainability in the community most adjacent to me as well. I feel like departments like Serve, Learn, Sustain, and probably some other organizations in Atlanta kind of highlight that side more. So I feel like both had a pretty equal influence, in all my engagements with organizations like that. Gave me great things to talk about during interviews, and I use a lot of those skills in my job, especially those soft skills and just kind of like the mindset it's given me since like you can think about sustainability and wanting to build like a resilient system, and resilient partnerships, kind of whatever your career is. So I think all that's been really beneficial.
At least on the Nicaragua project, I know we always had a ton of people interested in being on the technical committee. which is totally understandable at a technical school. But the soft skills that Isabel was talking about, and I think we've all been talking about, are really kind of what's been most important to me about my experience with Engineers Without Borders. Those are really important skills. You have to always coordinate with different consultants or groups in your job, and um, it can really kind of make or break a project, those soft skills. Um, Again, like Madison said, the technical skills are always important, but in some ways they can kind of be easier than the soft skills and project management.
Absolutely with you. Yeah, I think having the soft skills is super important to develop. I think Engineers Without Borders helps bring those out. Um, what are the biggest problems in the field of global development, and how does your work aim to address them? And if your work is like more domestic based, can you elaborate on how your work relates to reach the United Nations like SDGs, or how it ties into them to some degree?
Well, my job is definitely very local. Um, we give water to approximately 1 million people in the San Jose area. Um, but if you know anything about water in California, like Madison mentioned, or the West in general, really, we, as you probably know, have a terrible drought. We actually import a lot of our water from other places, so there's a lot of um, kind of political agreements as to who gets how much water and how it's distributed. Um, we had a large amount of water that was kind of destined for our area that we were expecting not be available. Basically, it evaporated. So, it's definitely a challenge in terms of sustainability. There's a lot of work going on right now in terms of conservation and doing a lot of things to make our water supply more resilient. There's a lot of recycled water projects going on here, which are really exciting. And in terms of kind of a more global perspective, I know that our company specifically has goals in line with the Paris Accords for greenhouse gases and other climate change goals, just in terms of our operations as a whole. So yeah, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think EDP Renewables is a global company, but the projects I work on are western side of the United States. So most of the projects have been California, a little bit of Arizona, for me personally. So I guess more relating to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, renewable energy. That's mainly where we come in. Water comes up so much in conversation because we work with a lot of farmers being neighbors because we're looking for a good amount of land to use for these projects. So we use like minimal water for dust mitigation, and kind of a lot of folks are seeing solar in particular as a minimal water use crop, which may be good, may be bad when you think we still need food. It's part of a broader conversation, but it's definitely something that comes up a lot. And I think, renewable energy is how we sort of fit into the whole idea there. Within that, we work on prospecting a lot of projects. So in terms of meeting sustainable development goals, I guess an issue that comes to mind a lot is how long these projects take. The project that I'm on site for now has taken maybe 6 years. It's supposed to go into construction next month. That's 300 megawatts for this one. But we're going to need a lot more renewable energy on the grid, and a more stable grid at that, to get to where we need to be as a country. So in prospecting, we're pretty restricted as to land use. You can't be near a Department of Defense area. You can't be near residences. You have to make sure you're doing good by the land and not taking land out of agriculture that we need, or if it has good water rights. There's so many factors to consider, trying to balance all the acts of needing renewable energy, making sure we're doing right by the land, and making sure the grid infrastructure can support all these new systems that are coming on the grid. So those are kind of the hurdles that we see frequently.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about what's going on the other side of the country. I work for a firm that is based in the Southeast in Texas, so it's definitely a very different political climate, kind of different like issues. Working in North Carolina, most of my projects are in North Carolina, but I support other projects in the Southeast and Texas. Um, and it's a domestic company too, so not as much global development focused, but when it comes to water and wastewater, these are, in my mind, like essential services that everyone who wants deserves and should have at an affordable price. So I feel like we definitely contribute to the UN SDG of clean water and sanitation. And just thinking about designing resilient systems is really important, as most of y'all have probably heard, like America's infrastructure is aging really badly. And I feel like utility services isn't something that everybody thinks about unless they're in that field. I think we oftentimes take for granted that we get water out of the tap, or that our toilets work. And I feel like utilities only make the news when there's disasters like sewer pipe overflows and causes pollution, or there's a water boil advisory, which I remember Atlanta having a lot of for some reason. So I feel like everything we do is pretty essential to sustainability, especially in my field where we're doing a lot of master planning. We're helping utilities think about like, what is your city going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years at build out growth, especially working in the Southeast in Texas is a little different from other areas of the country. Here, I feel like there's a lot of cities that are rapidly growing. There's a lot of new jobs here. So some of these cities are seeing this like exponential growth they never had in the past, and their infrastructure cannot keep up. So just bringing in all those like economic, social, and environmental factors when designing a system is super important. And also that regulatory side, like things like the lead and copper rule from the EPA, things like preparing for emergencies during like winter storms and power outages so people can still get clean water, we're seeing is so essential. And our country is definitely behind when it comes to infrastructure for being like a first world country. So there's definitely a lot we're doing and a lot more that needs to be done.
I think those are definitely giant problems in the field of global development. It's very important that you brought them up. Good point. Kind of tying into the degrading infrastructure, what is your opinion on the overall efficacy and longevity of Engineers Without Borders projects? How do you think that they could grow and change to accommodate for long-term sustainability?
Well, that's an excellent, excellent question. I think that's really important, and I think that one of the most important ways to ensure that the Engineers Without Borders projects are sustainable is to really encourage new members to understand how to make them sustainable, right? There's been kind of a lot of discussion on failed projects, and some of the common issues. And I know that's what Madison was trying to help with her last year. I remember her visiting our project. So I think that kind of really encouraging new members to understand how to make projects sustainable, making sure we have that community communication and learning about like the cultural context of the community and that kind of thing, and really encouraging people from the start to understand how crucial that is to the project's success will go a long way in getting the projects kind of in the right direction.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I also think while doing all the research into, the community that you're working with, and making sure you have close contacts with them and are iced a cold call like once a week, typically, making sure you keep that line of communication open so they feel comfortable bringing up issues to you and you feel comfortable bringing up issues to the community. So that's a partnership. That's important. And then on top of that, I would just say, try to use common sense. sometimes it's hard and you get emotionally attached and you want to see the project through. But if you're explaining the project issues to someone else and you find yourself like saying them out loud and realizing that you need to change something, or that maybe the project should be narrowed down in scope, maybe it's not going to work the way it's working, listen to yourself and listen to others' advice, and definitely use the entire Engineers Without Borders community, and maybe Serve, Learn, Sustain as well, to get feedback from others, because sometimes it's good to kind of take yourself out of the situation. And I feel like that's something that the Uganda project definitely would have benefited from.
Yeah, those are all great points, and that was a really good question. I feel like besides what was already brought up, of course, like working with the team's local, in-country, or domestic partner and the actual community members as closely as possible is important. I know that can sometimes be hard with language barriers, or those people might be too busy to fill out surveys or give feedback, but that's really important because they're the ones who will be living with the solution you give them long after. Maybe we'll go away one day, or like an NGO will bankrupt one day, but the people that are there are the ones who will feel the after effects. And then making sure to, with communicating with them, is kind of like doing like stakeholder engagement and research before implementing anything. I feel like for the Nicaragua project, it went on a very long time, and there was a ton of technical prototyping in the early years, even before I was a freshman at Georgia Tech. And then even while I was there in my younger years, we were still like doing technical prototypes that just weren't working that well. So you kind of have to evaluate, get feedback from mentors, and think like, oh, is this working, or should we try something else? In the end, we didn't even go with something that we had prototyped ourselves. So we really had to think about what's the most sustainable solution. It might not be something you invent or something you're super attached to, I think, like Madison mentioned. And then also the part that we all don't like to think about, but funding. I feel like if there's no funding right now, or there's no funding in the future, things won't work. So that's another really important aspect, to be hustling on those grants and like working with the NGO and EWB to ensure that projects are actually feasible.
I think you mentioned a very important point, which is using existing solutions that are on the market and how that's kind of an alternative to the your own creative prototypes. And kind of building off of that, as like new innovations come to the field, how do you see the field of sustainability changing in the next 10 or so years? How do you see it developing?
Well, I hope that it becomes less of its own field and just more of something that's integrated into every field. Because as we were talking about previously, you can choose to act sustainably in whatever you're doing. And I think that's going to become really important. I mean, out here in California, we're in an extreme drought. We have terrible wildfires all the time. And it's just becoming more and more crystal clear how important sustainability issues are, I think, to a society kind of more as a whole than perhaps in previous years. So hopefully in the future, sustainability will just become really a priority across industries and across society, so that it won't be seen as a separate entity, but more an integral part of all of our.
Yeah, that was very well said. I'll say ditto. And then, technology is always improving. That's always great. And then connecting back to the projects that y'all are working on. Just make sure you're not experimenting with the projects you're working on. Make sure you're doing tried and true tech that you can find data for, and make sure it's going to work smoothly and you can model it effectively. I know as tech students, it's neat to read the articles of brand new tech in some of these. That's always great. Just make sure you're doing tried and true if you're working in another community. That's another point I'll add.
Yeah, with sustainability, I feel like it's already come such a long way. I can even see it become bigger, and I think innovation will continue. And I think also a lot of the science and technical stuff is kind of there, and now it's time for the rest of the world, especially the policy and economic side, to catch up. Like, we know what we should be doing to mitigate against climate change, and we all want to be doing the right thing, but I just don't think the economic incentives are fully in place in every state, and there's a lot of areas like rural America and low income places that are getting left behind. So we also need to bring in that equity piece, so it's not just people like us or stuff that are getting access to this and getting to work in these jobs and benefiting. We definitely have a long way to go, but I try to be hopeful, but I definitely think we need a lot more on the policy and funding side.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And another quick point, um, I'm just thinking like solar panels that I'll work with day to day. It's great that they're getting more efficient, but I think a lot of the issue is just deployment. Like we have to deploy, and that carries off of what Isabella said with policy, economics, and looking into all those aspects as well, not just the pure tech.
I think that sustainability, being a very comprehensive field, has a lot of area to cover. Which facet of sustainability would you say is the most important to you in your career? I know there's been a lot of aspects that have already been covered, but like which one specifically, if we can boil it down?
Hmm. I think what's most interesting for my career specifically is recycled water. We have an advanced water purification center here in the county. It's not something that my company owns, but there's a water wholesaler that sells us water that owns that. If that makes sense, we get about half of our water from this water wholesaler. And that purification center creates water that you can drink from wastewater. But it's really just there right now as kind of an example because people are uncomfortable with using purified water to drink. So I think that we're definitely going to see that change in the future. And potable reuse is going to be something that is common, hopefully. It's kind of like what Madison was saying, like the technology is there, it's just not being implemented because kind of culturally, societally, we're not ready yet for that kind of thing. So I think that's going to be very interesting for the water industry.
Yeah, and for me, I'm having a hard time kind of picking one aspect, but I think just looking at net impact is something that's always interested me. So looking at in my case, kind of focus more on energy, the amount of megawatts we're trying to put on the grid. Um, it's interesting to work with interconnection as well and see how that process works. So in California, I think it's interesting to look at CAISO structure, and if you really want to go into rabbit hole about how RTOs could be structured around the U.S., I encourage all to look into it. It's something that I'm trying to learn more about, and I always find interesting. Me.
Yeah, for me, it's also hard to choose or say that something's like the most important aspect of sustainability, rather just like in my life or in my career, because I feel like all the aspects are pretty equally important, whether it's the tech side or the economic side or the social side. I guess in like my specific job right now, just like infrastructure resiliency is very important. Like if we can't get clean water to people, or if we can't ensure that everyone has access to sanitation, we've fallen way behind. So I see a lot coming into that field, and I feel like a lot of utilities are realizing like, oh shit, we don't have our stuff together, we don't have records. These are especially like smaller utilities, and they need help getting up to speed, eliminating any lead pipes in their system, making sure they can serve like new influxes of customers. So yeah, mostly my career, I see that as being pretty important. And then just in general, I just like the idea of like community sustainability. I want to be a part of like a community that is thriving, where people are very locally like connected and care about things and care about each other. So like that as well.
What made you all want to pursue a career in sustainability? Was there like a specific moment that made you want to, or something like that?
I think it's kind of hard to pin down, right? I do remember, uh, obviously, great advertising campaign about pollution where someone reached into a plastic bag and their hand came out in oil when I was a child. It was very memorable. Um, and I always wanted to work in something not necessarily sustainability as kind of my priority, but more as something for the good of the community. So I think sustainability is definitely involved there. Um, but yeah, I wasn't really sure what I wanted. And I was working in a community that didn't have a water system. And I was able to see just how detrimental that was. And like Isabella said, it's something that nobody thinks about when it's working perfectly, right? You turn on the tap and it's just there. So that was really kind of eye-opening for me in terms of the real effects that a lack of water infrastructure has. So that's how I got interested in my specific field.
Yeah, my reasoning was just climate change, to keep it simple. That's what first got me kind of in this industry. But also, it's a booming one at that. We're trying to do a lot more renewable energy, get cleaner water. There's a lot of great push going on. So I encourage all to seek those opportunities out because there are plenty of them now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. For me in particular, there weren't really any specific moments. I just liked being outside as a child, and so that's why I majored in environmental engineering, even though in my mind that major is pretty vague at Georgia Tech. But then in terms of career, I just wanted to learn technical skills and help other people, and I think you can do that in a ton of different careers out there and have sustainability be a pretty big part of it, whether it's like water, energy, designing like the cities of the future. And I think I also have a lot of interest beyond just technical work. Like I'm definitely interested in going back to get like a master's and doing working in a non-engineering field in the future. So I think yeah, just sustainability no matter what I do will be pretty like essential to that.
Makes sense. Wow, that was super cool. Um, Thinking back, what's a piece of advice that you wish you had heard as an undergraduate? This is a more general thing.
Um, so my degree at Georgia Tech was my second undergraduate degree. So I'm thinking back to my first one, I guess. I applied a lot of that advice to my second one, which is basically just you'll only be in college for a short period of time. There's a ton of resources available to you. You might as well make use of all of them. There's always a good reason that you shouldn't go to like a talk or a seminar or go, see the serve, learn, sustain people, or there's always a test to study for, and making time for those other opportunities outside of class is really extremely valuable, um, even if you are super busy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And honestly, the first thing that came to mind was, and I don't know if this is something I want associated with me as advice, but I wish I had studied less and taken more advantage of other opportunities. Um, Pick what you want with that. Maybe don't do that. Maybe do it, depending on what you want. But I see so much cool stuff going on at Georgia Tech, and I was like, oh, shoot, that was going on when I was there. I didn't know. So I encourage y'all to, I don't know, read the newsletters that get sent out. Go to cool events. So much sustainability stuff going on too. Uh, Work with other clubs as well. Try to do partnerships. Just make the most of it. And then, also the whole aspect of getting a job. Um, don't stress out too much about it. You go to a good school, you have good connections. All of us on this call would be willing to talk with you, I'm sure, as well as any other EWB alumni. Um, so you're in good hands. Find out what you want to do and try to go down that path, and don't get too stressed stressed out about the timeline of it.
And also, just to add on to that, you can be as worried as you want about getting a job, but then suddenly you graduated in the middle of a historic pandemic. So you can't really control everything. So you might as well have the best time you can while you're at Georgia Tech and really take advantage of all those learning opportunities, because everyone has a different, like, follow this exact procedure to get the perfect job. But in actuality, maybe that worked for someone else, but you can't control all of the factors that are going to go into what happens when you graduate. So just, take advantage of the opportunities available to you and kind of don't worry about whatever prescribed path towards ensured success, because no one can really, not graduate in a pandemic.
Yeah, that's all great. I definitely agree with a lot of it. I know like Georgia Tech was pretty stressful. I was a little high strung at times too, and you're surrounded by a lot of overachievers. And since y'all are in EWB, I'm sure y'all are overachievers too. But definitely like do as much as you can without burnout and take care of your mental health. That's very important. But try new things and don't just do like technical things. I feel like I did a lot of like non-technical stuff. And I also encourage study abroad if people are interested in that. I feel like I learned the most about sustainability as kind of like a field and a practice when I actually did a study abroad program. So that was really interesting. And then there's a time when forgot, but me and Jessica were like roommates on like a little class that had a little Asia trip. So that was really cool
That was
too.
great.
Yeah, we got to see how other countries kind of dealt with engineering disasters and like natural disasters. So there's just like so many different things to learn and try. And then also thinking more locally, I personally believe it's really important to be connected to the community you live in. So like get out in Atlanta and see like what Atlanta's actually like and what kind of like unique challenges Atlanta has and how you can contribute to that. And if you move somewhere else after college, try to do the same wherever you end up as well. I think that's really important to see things outside of like the academic bubble and just like meet people outside of like your normal walk of life. And then I guess like related to the job side of things, like I was pretty stressed graduating during the pandemic and like job searching. Like I did all these interviews. I was like, oh my gosh, finding a job so stressful. But then it all worked out. So I think it's okay to be stressed. And it's okay. A lot of my friends like also didn't have jobs right after graduation anyways. So if you don't have a job right when you graduate, or if your like previous internship doesn't hire you, like it's really no big deal. Like there are jobs out there for us. So just like work hard and try your best. I guess that's very generic, but I bet y'all all do well. And if you get a job and you realize like, oh, I don't like this, like you can change. I think people switch careers so much, people go back to school so much. We have very long lives, hopefully, so we have a lot of options to try new things.
I'm totally with you. I like that advice a ton. Sustainability specific, what advice can you give audience members that are interested in pursuing a career in sustainability, such as resources, networking, crafting a resume?
Um, Well, I think having Engineers Without Borders on your resume is great in general. At every career fair at Georgia Tech, that's pretty much all I talked about. It's a really great experience. Um, but kind of in kind of like a specific thing you can do to kind of determine if the job you're applying for is going to be a good fit for you in terms of you valuing sustainability. You can ask in the interview questions about like where they see their company going and things about the future. And I think that will really help give you kind of an idea if the company is really prioritizing sustainability, even if it's not in an industry that's very obviously sustainability related. Um, so I would encourage you to all do that.
Yeah, I know whenever I was thinking about jobs, I reached out to a lot of people randomly on LinkedIn and just asked if they had like 10 minutes to talk about what they do, like depending on what their position was to kind of figure out what they do day to day and what I want to do. Um, some people don't reply, don't take it to heart, but that never hurts also, and that was helpful for me. Um, and what Jessica said as well, like pulling from your experience in this club will definitely be useful.
Yeah, I know the word networking can be kind of intimidating, and I'm not even sure if I'm good at networking or how networking really works, but it is true. Like, people help get you opportunities. So I feel like things like networking with members of your clubs that you're in, or going to the career fair, or going to other speaker events is super valuable because that's just how you learn about like other people's lives and what they do. And then kind of part of networking can also be like mentorship. If you have like a mentor in your life, that can be really helpful. And I know like there's a ton of mentorship programs at Georgia Tech. I tried like a few of them. I didn't get like mega involved in them, but it was just useful learning from different people and having someone you can like reach out to. For example, I know SAA does a mentorship program. Oh, and I guess EWB has one now too. That's cool. But SAA does one where it's people like alumni from all sorts of different like fields and majors, and you can like kind of specify what you're interested in and get paired. And there's also a more sustainability focused one that the network RCE Greater Atlanta does. And you can meet some really cool sustainability professionals outside of Georgia Tech through that network. That was like also a big part of my undergrad. So there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of people who like are more than happy to help young people. So that's good to know too.
Yeah, I actually have a mentor who is a Georgia Tech alum that I still speak to um, every once in a while. And it's really nice to have someone to reach out to. And I know it can be really intimidating. I never used to network at all because I just didn't understand what that was all about. Um, but now I find it really nice, and I really talk to her once a year, I think. Um, but she's in transportation instead of water, and so we get a lot of kind of interesting information from each other about the industry. And she was really, really helpful. She did like a mock interview with me and helped me during my job search. So, recommend.
Thank you all for your answers to those questions. Those were fantastic. I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to open up the panel to question and answers from the general members. If you all have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them in order of whenever they're submitted.
Hey, could I just like speak my question?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. Uh, Hi, I am a part of the Malawi project, and I tend to like overthink things, especially when it comes to careers. And so I went to some professors in global development. I was like, how do I get into this field? And they were like, well, EWB and EWB type work, kind of like Peace Corps, just like international development projects, not as cost effective as just like working in a lucrative career and donating it. And like those kinds of ideas were repeated and actually are kind of like spreading around more and more. And it totally makes sense, but is this something that you guys like questioned going into your career or had to deal with, or I don't know, how did you navigate that kind of topic, like money and donating versus just like working directly in the fields?
Is pretty tricky, and it's something I definitely struggle with. I've only been working like 1 year, but I think it's okay. Everyone overthinks things and stresses, but we'll have many opportunities throughout a career to try new things. And unfortunately, money does play a role, and so people need to make it. I don't know, it's complicated, but I feel like a lot of careers are profitable and you're contributing to sustainability. The thing is, like, I was always interested in working for a nonprofit too, but I feel like that's likely something I'll do later in life when I can afford it. Um, Sometimes, like, taking on those jobs can be like a privilege because that means maybe you don't have to worry about certain economic factors. But I do wish, like, more of those types of like social work and humanitarian jobs paid a more desirable living wage. Yeah, because that just sucks. So I don't know what advice to give, but I think like you'll be able to make time for everything, um, and not just like donating money, but you can like donate time. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that wasn't helpful.
So I actually, my first career was essentially international development. Um, and what I wanted was to work for an NGO internationally. But I decided that wasn't for me, because I ended up not wanting to live abroad for long periods of time. But in that process, I got a lot of advice about doing that. And basically, something that really stuck with me was while you're young, right out of school, you probably don't have a lot of family commitments or things to necessarily keep you in the States. And if you're willing to live abroad, you can really move up very quickly in those kind of organizations because a lot of people do want to stay in the States for a variety of reasons. And so if that's something you want to do, actually doing it right out of school um, might be easier because there's not as much competition for those stationed abroad, depending on what you're interested in. And like Isabella said, you can always like change your mind and pivot your career. And I think that no matter what you do, if you are working abroad, you're going to gain a lot of really excellent skills. So even if you decide to do like a hard pivot to a different career that's extraordinarily lucrative and just a totally different field, I think you can easily do that in today's like environment in terms of making career changes and those transferable skills.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a really good question because I think a lot of people ask it, probably all of us included. Um, the way I try to think of it was sort of what would make me happy, and what I thought was a pretty good net impact. Um, so, however, yeah, same as what Jessica and Isabella said, it depends on your personal situation. Um, but at the same time, there is a lot of opportunity where uh, you can live all right and still benefit um, benefit the world around you. So if it's a spectrum, so wherever you feel comfortable on that spectrum, look within that spectrum for career paths. And if you don't like it, you can always change it. So no worries.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's always nice to be reassured that like there's like a future after your first career option, right?
Yeah, I think that's really hard to remember because it always seems like such a big deal applying to a job and like will that define you for the rest of your life and like dictate every other job opportunity that you get. And I definitely fell into that kind of mindset while applying for jobs, but it's really super unnecessary. I got hired for something that I'm not doing anymore because somebody on staff left. So like things change all the time and you can definitely make the choice to change your career.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time. I think with that final question, we're going to draw the panel to a close. I'm going to stop recording.